Welcome to PokerStrategy.com, your professional poker school. In the previous video, you learned how to evaluate your hand on the flop and what action to take. This video is concerned with the dynamics of playing on the turn and the river. In all sports, it is important to have the initiative. That is, be the one who puts pressure on the other opponents. How should you assess, though, in general, who has the initiative? It is determined by the action of the previous round. Let's look at an example. You are on the button with aces, also known as the rockets. Other than yourself, 3 other players are in the hand. MP and MP3 check. The player in the cutoff bets, and you raise. All players call. Now when the turn comes, who has the initiative? The answer is easy. It is the person who was last to bet or raise in the previous round of betting. Calling has no effect on the initiative because you raise on the flop and then everybody else called. You have the initiative. Here's another example. Against you are on the button, this time with an ace and a 4, and you have an open-ended straight draw. Again, MP and MP3 check. The cutoff bets, and you raise with your strong draws. MP and MP3 call. However, the cutoff raises once more. You call while MP and MP3 fold. Who has the initiative on the turn? The initiative now lies with the cutoff. He was the last to raise since you only called. Let's stick with our first example. You have an overpair on the flop and have seized the initiative. On the turn, your pair has improved to a set and it is very unlikely you are behind since only a 2 and 4 and 4 and 7 beat you. MP bets, MP3 calls, and the cutoff folds. You raise. If you met with a further raise, you must be cautious that someone might have the straight. It is not always the case, however. It is much more probable that they also have an ace or perhaps 2 pair. Also, consider what you have the chance to improve. There are 10 cards which come on the river and give you a full house or a 4 of a kind to beat a straight. In any case, your hand is simply too strong to fold. How does the situation look, however, if you only have a pair of aces on the turn? Generally, with this type of hand, if no one bets before you, you bet. If someone bets before you, however, just call. Why do you play so differently in this situation? If someone bets before the player with the initiative has yet to act, we call this a donk bet. This action typically indicates that they have hit something or hold a strong hand. In contrast with the situation where you had a set on the turn, against 2 pair you are now behind. But you have a chance to hit one of 8 cards, that improve your hand to the best on the river. Against a straight you can no longer win the hand. No card will give you the best hand, you are drawing dead. Therefore it is now better to simply call your opponent. One tends to speak of a call down. You should play very differently on the turn if you had no made hands but a draw. You sit in middle position with King Queen. The players which remain, MP3, cut off on the big blind, has so far not bet and you have the initiative. Generally you want to see the river cheaply if possible as you still have no made hand. Therefore you check. MP3 bets, and the cutoff and the big blind call. What do you do? If on the river you hit one of these cards, you have the absolute best hand. Therefore you call. Through time, the following rules have developed in regard to playing strong draws with initiative on the flop. If you have a maximum of 2 opponents, for instance, and you believe there is a good chance of them folding, you can bet. This is a continuation bet. You may call in such a situation if there is a raise before you or after you, if you hold a monster draw, an OESD, a flush draw, or a double gut shot. With a gut shot, you should only call if the pot size is at least 10 times the size of the bet to be called. For example, the pot size must be $2 or more to call a 20-cent bet with a gut shot. In all other cases of unfinished hands, you check and fold to any bets made. With raises behind you, the situation can quickly become unpleasant, since a raise made against the pre-flop raiser indicated great strength. Therefore, you need to know exactly how to behave in such situations. Let's look at the situation of our set of aces. MP and MP3 check. The cutoff bets, and you raise. MP folds, MP3 calls, and the cutoff raises again, the so-called 3-bet. You raise again. This is called capping. Generally, this is how to act against a raise after you. You raise again with 2 pair or better, but with just top pair and over pair or draw, you call. With every other hand you fold. But now let's see what happens when you get repeatedly re-raised. Let's look at the following example. MP, MP3 in the cutoff check, and you bet. MP raises this time, MP3 folds, and the cutoff raises again. What do you do? Now you must look at the board very closely and consider what exactly it is your opponent might have. As you saw, it is possible that somebody has a completed straight. You should just call in this situation. It may be the case that you are beaten, but even against a straight, there are still many cards that may come out on the river that give you the best hand. As a rule of thumb, you should remember if the board does not allow for many better hands, that is, no straights or flushes are possible, then you should raise as much as you can if you hold 2 pair or better. If a better hand is possible, for instance, the straight, you can call if you have a flush draw or monster draw. If you hold a double gut shot or OESD, then you may call if there are no more than 2 cards of a single suit on the board. With all other hands, including top pair and over pairs, you fold. In exceptions, you can also discard a flush draw if, for instance, the board has a pair on it. If the opponents are playing aggressively in such a situation, they may well have the full house, which you can't beat. If you hold a full house or 4 of a kind, you should naturally continue to raise, since it is impossible for a flush or straight to beat you. If you merely called a bet on the flop, then on the turn or the river, you will usually follow someone else's lead, rather than acting yourself. On the other hand, this makes playing a little simpler. Let's first look at made hands. With 2 pair or better, you should bet and raise. If the community cards allow for better hands and you face resistance, you should be more cautious and just call. If you have top pair or an over pair, then you just check and call. If several opponents raise somehow so that you have to call more than a single bet, you should get out of the hand. You are likely to be beaten. How should you play draws? With strong draws, you always call. Regardless of the amount to be called, you still call. This includes monster draws, flush draws, OESDs, double gut shots and gut shots with overcards. With a gut shot, as always, you should call only if the total prize pot is at least 10 times larger than the amount to be called. In all other circumstances, it is no longer profitable to play and you should fold. The river is similar to the turn in various ways. You see a single community card and bet sizes are double the big blind, and yet the game's dynamics on the river vary substantially. Your hand can no longer improve. Unfinished hands are now worthless. If, for example, you bet on the flop on the turn, there is a slight chance of bluffing a single opponent out on the river if, say, he himself was holding a draw. Also, in the final round, you once again distinguish between the cases of having the initiative or not. You first consider the case where you have the initiative. In this example, you sit in the cutoff and hold Jack 10 suited. Other than yourself, the 2 blinds are still in the game. Before the flop, you raised and the blinds called. On the flop, you hit top pair. The 2 blinds checked, you bet, and the blinds called again. The same happened on the turn. On the river comes a relatively bad card, since it completes a potential straight. The blinds check, and you bet. Now something unpleasant happens. The small blind raises, and the big blind folds. What do you do? The small blind can have a number of hands. The straight, but also a pair of 6s. A 4, a 6, or be on a bluff. Therefore, it's possible you are still ahead. Therefore, you call the raise. There are 2 reasons for this. Firstly, you may still have the best hand. Secondly, you are showing the table that you cannot easily be bluffed. Attentive players, some of which exist on the micro limits, will notice this and will not try to bluff you in the future. What rules can you lay down for playing the river with the initiative? If you have top pair or better, you always bet. If a raise comes behind you and a better hand, for instance flushes or straights are possible, then you just call. If a bet comes before you, you raise with 2 pair or better, provided not many better hands are possible. Otherwise, you just call with 2 pair or better. With all other hands weaker than a top pair, you fold. How should you play the river without the initiative? In this example, you have just one opponent at this point. On the turn, you call the raise from the big blind, and now you do not have the initiative. The river card brings you not the flush you were hoping for, but it gave you top pair. So you bet, even though you don't have the initiative. In this case, your opponent raises, however. What do? It is quite possible that you are beaten. With top pair, however, and only one opponent, it is still quite possible that you can win. Moreover, you need only call a single bet to force the showdown, so you call. What general guidelines are there for the river play without initiative? You bet if you encountered top pair on the river and can call a raise from your opponent. If on the flop or turn you had a top pair or an over pair and simply called, you call again on the river. You bet or raise with 2 pair or better if few better hands are possible, otherwise call. If you do not have a made hand, you check and fold. In this video you learned what is meant by the concept of initiative. You now know how to play each of the different hand categories, whether you do or do not possess the initiative. With this knowledge and that from the 3 preceding videos, you now have enough tools to properly take advantage of the opponents on the micro limits. Use them. The team at Poker Strategy wish you lots of luck at the tables.